Hi, good evening. This is Emily Walker with the U.S. Embassy Algiers, and you're watching Let's Chat, a show on American culture. I'm coming to you live from the American Cultural Center Algiers, which unfortunately is still closed to the public, but the U.S. Embassy proudly supports 4 other cultural centers around Algeria. Those are in Oran, Constantine, Ouargla, and Bishar. So it's February, which is Black History Month in the United States. All month, we're featuring topics that deal with African Americans and the significant contributions they've made to U.S. history. We've talked about famous Americans like Muhammad Ali, James Baldwin, and Ida B. Wells. And last week, we looked at how you can use speeches by famous Black Americans to improve your English. Today, we're talking about when the Black Panthers came to Algiers. My guest today is Lina Baaziz. Hey, Lina.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Hi.
Welcome. I'm so excited to have you. So Lina is a graduate student at Frères Montouri Constantine I, where she specializes in American studies. She's also a writer. Lina manages the Algerian writing program, and she was a participant in the U.S. Department of State program called Between the Lines, which sends young Algerian writers to the University of Iowa in the United States. So she's been in the U.S. for a few weeks, but that does not account for the perfect American accent Lina has. You're going to hear that in just a minute, but not only am I super impressed with Lina's English, but I'm also super impressed with her intellectual curiosity. The last time that I saw Lina in Constantine, she told me about her thesis project, looking at the time the Black Panthers spent in Algeria in the 1960s and 1970s. I wondered why a revolutionary American group, well known at that time for its militant stance on American issues of the time, such as racism and the Vietnam War, was in Algeria. So Lina told me that Algeria became a capital for leftist revolutionaries, and I wanted to know more about this interesting time period. So I invited her to talk about this fascinating time in history when Algeria became a center of politics and the whole world was watching. So over to Lina for what I know is going to be a great and interesting presentation. You can ask Lina questions in the YouTube chat, and I will relay those questions to her. So over to you, Lina.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a great evening. I'm just going to be sharing my presentation. Emily, is it working?
It is. Looks good.
Perfect. So as Emily said, I'm doing my master's thesis on the intersection of Algerian foreign policy and the stay and asylum of the Black Panther Party members here in Algiers in 1969 and just up till 1973. So I'm not really good with dates, so I hope I got that one right. So we're just going to go through the agenda today. Today, we're going to talk about who are the Black Panther Party, who are these Black Panthers, why did they start their organization, what were they working on, their ideology. Then we're going to move on to how they come to Algeria and why did Algeria support them. And then we will talk for quite some time about the cultural revolution that they did with the help of the Pan-Africanist movement here in Algeria through the Pan-African Cultural Festival. And then we'll move on to how it kind of fell apart, and then talk about the cultural impact and the Black Panther Party's legacy. So you'll see me say the BPP a lot throughout the presentation or throughout this talk. It just stands for the Black Panther Party. So that's just the abbreviation I'll be using. Okay, so moving on, who are the Black Panthers? I'm sure a lot of you have seen the Black Panther movie and have seen Beyonce wear all black outfits and Kendrick Lamar talk about the Black Panthers, and you've always wondered why are they talking about Panthers? I only know Pink Panther, I don't know the Black Panthers. So the Black Panther Party were a revolutionary group and a revolutionary organization that worked with the ideology of Black nationalism, socialism, and were working against the racial discrimination in the 1960s. The group was founded by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale in 1966 in Oakland, California. And it was hand in hand with the Black Power movement. So I'm sure you're familiar with Martin Luther King and figures like Malcolm X. So they kind of were working at the same time, but like while Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were like relatively pacifist in their quest towards the civil rights movement, the Black Panther Party were armed and they were fighting the police brutality. And I think it's quite relevant to today's cause of like the Black Lives Matter movement. And we can see like how they impacted it. And I'm kind of wondering, like, I've realized this like 2 years ago. Like I came across it because I was looking up Elaine Mortfe, a translator and interpreter that worked with them, a Jewish American woman, and she was like interpreting their work here in Algeria, and was with them when they were working with the FLN or like with other organizations here, but that didn't speak English because it was the 1960s and 70s. Algeria was just independent. English was not prominent, if not relevant at all. So there was an entire kind of like barrier, like linguistic barrier. And Elaine was working towards breaking that barrier by being their interpreter and helping them around. So I'm wondering, like, have you heard of this before? Is this the first time you hear about it?
You guys can answer in the YouTube chats. Do you know anything about the Black Panther Party? Also, have you heard of Elaine Mortfe, who Lina just mentioned, who was an American who moved first to France in the 1950s, and then she moved to Algiers in the 1960s. And as Lina said, worked as an interpreter at a time when not that many Algerians spoke English. So she was kind of a crucial interpreter for some revolutionary figures who came through Algiers. So let us know if you've heard of the Black Panthers in the chats.
Okay, so now we're gonna get to talking about why did the Black Panther Party, a group of Black Americans who were fighting for their rights in the US in the 1960s, probably like 11,000 miles away or more from Algeria, from a North African newly independent country, come to be in contact and come to actually stay there for an entire 4 years. So as we said before, like the Black Panther Party had armed conflict with the police in the US back then. And their founder, Huey, was one time arrested and held in custody of the FBI. This kind of made a lot of the Black Panther Party supporters, allies, and the Black Panther Party themselves protest in Oakland, California, and all over the United States. Those protests quickly turned into like armed confrontations with the police. And in one of them, Eldridge Cleaver, one of the Black Panther Party members, and I think he was the Minister of Information of the Black Panther Party and a writer of Soul and Ice, I think that was the book, if I'm not wrong. He got into an armed conflict with the police members, along with other members of the Black Panther Party. He was severely wounded, and then the police pressed charges to arrest him for attempted murder. And he had a warrant out for his arrest, and the FBI was looking for him, trying to track him down. So what Cleaver did is he decided to flee and like fly out of the US, went to Cuba with his wife, Kathleen Cleaver. And in Cuba, Fidel Castro was in power back then, I think. And Fidel Castro had like a lot of connections with the then president of Algeria, Ben Bella, and later on after the coup, Boumediene. And both of them kind of had the same support towards revolutionary movements and towards internationalism and third worldism when it comes to international relations and foreign policy. So to kind of like put these boring technical terms into more simpler terms, they kind of been like, we've been through colonialism. We know what it feels to be oppressed, to be discriminated against. So we're going to support all movements, regardless of their values whatsoever. If they're looking to be free again, if they're looking to revolt against an oppressive government. And the Black Panther Party fell under that kind of umbrella of revolutionary movements. So Fidel Castro suggested that they would not stay in Cuba. And so like there was the whole missile crisis going on at the same time. It's very interlocked when it comes to history. So Fidel Castro didn't want any more tensions with the US, and he sent them out to Algeria. The plan was that they would go to France, but then they came here and they stayed in the Casbah for 4 long years.
Lina, to answer your question, who's heard of Eldred Cleaver or the Black Panthers or knew about this history? A couple people responded. Noor Kidder said, of course, Algeria was always the symbol of freedom and revolution. Amina Lamari says she knows the movement, but not Eldred Cleaver. So she's learning more about that. And a lot of people said, no, this is the first time that they've heard about this.
Okay. I'm glad a lot of people heard about this. And if you haven't heard about it, we're going to learn together. So, so cut to 1969. Eldridge Cleaver and Kathleen Cleaver and Ms. Brown, I think, and another member of the, I think, Stokely Carmichael, arrived here in Algiers, were welcomed by the FLN, the Front de Libération Nationale. Is that it? Yeah, the National Liberation Front. And they were welcomed by them. They were supported by the government because Algeria, back then, supported all revolutionary movements, of course, and also kind of helped them physically and like fiscally. Sorry. So like they had, we're going to talk about what they had, but I want to talk about this picture for a bit. So this picture was when they just arrived in Algiers, and it's an Algerian kid holding a poster of Huey P. Newton. So it's kind of like super interesting to see that an Algerian kid in the 1970s was supportive of the whole Free Huey movement. Okay, so what did Algerian President Boumediene do for the Black Panthers when they came here? So they kind of had this acknowledgement of their existence, like this moral support from the Algerian government, but they also had a lot of welfare given out to them. So they had a $500 US dollar stipend every single month, and they were offered several villas in Algiers. And the one that you can see on the right is the embassy of the Black Panther Party. And I think that's super interesting because back then, Algeria didn't have any foreign policy connections with the United States of America. We didn't have an ambassador, we didn't have a consulate, we didn't have a counselor.
No embassy then, yeah, there was no embassy whatsoever. So
no embassy whatsoever. So
these Americans came here during this time.
Yeah. And so it's kind of interesting to look at it and be like, so were they actually like the first diplomats or like ambassadors of the United States in Algeria? Was this like the first foreign policy, even if it's not the official foreign policy connection? It's super interesting to look at it that way. So that was their home, and among several other homes. I couldn't find out the exact address otherwise. And I probably shouldn't give it online. Maybe people live there, but yeah, it's somewhere in Algiers. So like if you go find it, it's a historical place. So they started their own international section, and the very first international section of the Black Panther Party right here in the Casbah, and with the money that Algeria was giving them. And okay, they also had cars apparently and chauffeurs, and a lot of people kind of judged them for it because they were like, okay, we expected you to be these like revolutionary socialists and like fighting for the proletariat, but you live in villas and you have chauffeurs and cars. So are you like palace revolutionaries? Okay. And then we're going to get to the criticism later, but yeah. Okay, so what were they doing here for like the 4 years that they spent here? They did a lot of diplomatic activism and international activism. So along the lines of like the Black Panther Party ideology is to form allies with people all over the world, and third world countries, or like developing countries would be the more appropriate wording for it, were the best petri dish to grow these kind of like connections and these kind of like networkings with people who would back them up, as well as white allies within the US as well. So that was like a huge part of their fight and a huge part of like their struggle. So what they did is that they formed the international coalition, of course, with like the Black Panther Party, and their job was to present the Black Panther Party to several different like missions here in Algeria. So like they would go to the Embassy of China, they go to the Embassy of North Korea, Vietnam, like any country that would have their policy align with theirs.
Lina, can I interject and ask you a question here? So they were meeting with North Korea. They were meeting with North Vietnam at the time that the United States was in a war with that country. Mm-hmm. And China, which maybe was a controversial choice too. So, and they're supported by Cuba. So these are countries that at that time in the late 1960s, the United States, I'll say, had a complicated relationship with. You know how that was received, them meeting with these people, meeting with those embassies. Were Americans mad about this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they were considered an anti-American group. They were basically pinpointed as like these terrorist groups at some point. That's how the American government considered them, like aside from their struggle to racial justice, them just going straight ahead to like the things that would make the US conservative parties mad, and trying to like have allies with them. And eventually like some of the extremist Black Panther Party members wanted to dismantle the entire US system and to burn down the White House. So I think it's fair enough to say that they did get mad. And an interesting thing is that at that time, it was like, I think it was the Cold War, or like the beginning of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. And there was this entire tension of McCarthyism and like people going, vilifying communism and like anything that has to do with like Marxism and all of that. And then them being interested in that and like giving out free breakfast and like free healthcare through the party and like through the money that they raised through the party. So it's super interesting to look at the dynamics of how it worked and how it affected later on the Algerian American foreign policy relations as well, because it kind of created a lot of tension. Like, why would we support something like that and then want to have relations with the US like system and the American system? And yeah, so also what they did, they also had like a conference at the University of Algiers to talk about their struggle and like their cause. So all of what they were doing here was mainly introducing their ideology, introducing their fight and their cause, trying to get allies, trying to get backup, networking. That's how it's all started. What happened later, we'll get to it. Because at the moment that they started to arriving, a bunch of members had different agendas than others, and Eldridge Cleaver being the one that's most prominent and the most famous of them and most known, and like he was the leader of the Black Panther Party in Algeria, kind of grew a big head and had an agenda of his own as well, and shifted his focus from the cause to other things. So that's what they did. Like, oh, I got a few pictures to talk about. So on the left is Eldridge Cleaver and Kathleen. Sorry, not Kathleen, Elaine. Elaine was doing interpreting for them, and she was also a journalist. I forgot to mention that. Elaine was friends with Frantz Fanon, which is super interesting. I have this entire chapter in my thesis about the Fanonian legacy and how Fanon affected and like impacted the start of Pan-Africanism and basically Algeria's support to the Black Panther Party as well. And on the right, it's the Black Panther Party and the Palestinian delegation. So it kind of like flows smoothly. Like when you think about it, Algeria was supportive of all revolutionary independence movements. So they were also supportive of the Palestinian cause and the Black Panther Party. So it kind of like they got together. It was the right environment to talk about like all of these independence movements. And this is from the journal of the Black Panther Party. They talked about them going to Algiers and like what they were doing in Algiers. So like that's just a scanning of the journal back then. And now we're going to talk about like the fun part of this whole thing, because like before it was just like historical background, a lot of foreign policy, a lot of big words. But now we're going to talk about the Pan-African Festival. And I think that Emily, you guys are going to do something like similar to it this year.
Yeah, we are. Thanks for that lead in, Lina. Yeah, this could be a good time when I can tell all of you guys on YouTube that the U.S. Embassy, in partnership with the Algerian Ministry of Culture, is planning One Beat Sahara, which is a huge musical residency that's going to bring 25 musicians together from 7 countries surrounding Algeria. So there's Algerian musicians, Moroccan musicians, Tunisian, from Mali, from Mauritania, from Niger, and also musicians from America. And they're all coming to Algeria. They're actually arriving in a couple days to do a musical residency in Tagit. After they're done doing this residency and creating music, they're going to do a big concert on March 5th in Tagit. And then there will be another concert in Algiers on March 12th. So we're very busy at the embassy planning this amazing musical experience that I hope makes some part of history, as this Pan-African Cultural Festival did.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited about it. I'm stoked. So in 1969, President Boumediene, I keep like mixing up Boumediene and Bombella. So President Boumediene's foreign policy didn't change much from that of Bombella. They both supported the Pan-Africanist movement, which is kind of like a movement that thinks of Africa as a country rather than like North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Central Africa, South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, and like these little units with different cultures, but more of like, where a big unit, it's Pan-Africa, it's like the unity of Africanity, despite the variations of colors and cultures and languages throughout the continent. So that was the idea of the Pan-Africanist movement and Pan-Africanism. And in support of that, in support of like revolutionary movements there and independences that were happening, they got together and they decided to host the very first Pan-African festival in Algiers. The newly independent, very glamorous, high on being newly independent and like getting the French out, Algeria. So everyone's like, yeah, we did it. Let's have a party. So they decided to do I think it was a 10-day cultural festival. They had musicians over, they had movie, documentary makers, filmmakers, singers, writers, musicians, poets, politicians, so many people from all over Africa and from the United States as well. Like a lot of African Americans and Black Americans came over to celebrate here in Algiers, celebrate Africanity and Blackness and everything that's in Africa. So during the festival, the Algerian government put up Cleaver and his wife and a bunch of other Black Panther Party members in Hotel Atli. I'm not sure if it still exists. I didn't check that out. But it used to belong to the Algerian government, and they used to host a lot of revolutionary groups there. So it was kind of like a very vibrant place where a lot of heated conversations happened. And during their stay in that hotel, they got to meet with a lot of other politicians and other diplomats, and they got to present and like represent their cause during the festival. So Other Black American artists and political figures also attended the festival, namely like Stokely Carmichael, Ed Blulands, Nina Simone, the jazz musician. Do you guys know Nina Simone?
I'll ask them. I bet this audience has heard of Nina Simone. Was that the first time that Algerians heard of Nina Simone or saw her perform? And that was probably.
I have two anecdotes for that. So on one side, my parents, they weren't that old back then, but like I think they were like 7, 6 years old. But they told me that like it was a fascinating time where this festival was huge and it was broadcasted everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was singing the songs that were sung there, and like everyone knew about Makiba, like Miriam Makiba, the South African singer who was also Carmichael's wife. So yeah, I think that was the first time they hear of Black American artists in Algeria. And the second anecdote is like my it's not my supervisor, but like he's the head of the department at the university here, and we were discussing my thesis topic, and he said, "Oh, actually, like I remember when that happened. I was a teenager and I went to Algiers for it." And that's kind of like awesome to hear, because everyone used to go all the way to Algiers to see this festival, and it was a huge deal.
Yeah, in Algeria in the 1960s, there probably weren't many huge concerts like this, especially ones where people were flying in from all over the world.
I think it was like probably one of the very first concerts and like festivals that Algeria ever had, because it was just like a few years after the independence. Mm-hmm. So maybe before it was like non-Algerian concerts, so like French organized. So all of these artists stayed at the famous Hotel Saint Georges, which is now called Hotel Jazair. So if you're in Algiers, just like go drive up to Hotel Jazair, take a few pictures, because it is a historical place. And not a lot of people know what went down in that hotel, but a lot of, in that hotel itself, Stokely Carmichael and Eldridge Cleaver had a conflict over the ideologies of like the Black Panther Party, and that's how they went separate ways, and everything started to fall apart after that. But also, and during the World War II period, Eisenhower stayed there with Churchill, and they were planning like the North African wars against the Nazis there. And I think Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir also stayed there. So yeah, I mean, it's basically La Sorbonne of Algiers. So please do go pay it a visit and like take a few pictures, and because like amazing philosophers have walked that place, and yeah, political figures. So
interesting. Okay. Yeah, I've been in that hotel a number of times. It's beautiful and has gorgeous tile and a beautiful lobby. I just didn't realize all the history that had happened there. That's so interesting.
It carries a lot of history. It's crazy to think about it right now. It's been like 60 years and like almost 60 years, I think. A little over 50 years, but it's still there, and like we can still go visit it and be like, oh my God, can't believe someone was here. And like they did this huge thing. So also during the festival, the Black Panther Party was given a storefront in Didouche Mourad, where they displayed the artwork of Amori Douglas. Amori Douglas was the artist of the Black Panther Party. He made a lot of posters. These are just 2 examples of the beautiful artwork that Amori made. And they displayed it in the middle of Algiers for all Algerians to see. And it's so interesting. Like I wish I had a time machine, could go back, because like, I mean, if a bunch of people from the Casbah who didn't speak any English, who spoke French or spoke Arabic, were to just like walk up and be like, colorful posters, but I have no idea what it says. Like, how did that dynamic go? Like, how did that work? And like the whole assimilation of cultures and like the intersections of the 2 cultures would be so interesting to see. And this is why I'm studying this. This is why I'm researching this. I'm trying to like get as close as possible to time machine travel. So I've had a few pictures over here as well from the festival. They're black and white because it was really, really long time ago. So this is all we can get. But this is
oh wow, look at that. In front of the Grand Post. Wow.
Yeah, in front of the Grand Post. And I think that's Shawi dancing. I found that wrong. But yeah, like the pictures are so fascinating. Like you have the Algerian culture, and then you also have, I think, two Marines, like on the right. Are those Marines or some sort of?
On the right.
Oh no, actually on the left, on your left.
Oh, those just look like Algerian policemen to me.
Oh yeah. Okay. I got excited for a bit, thought they were Marines.
No, so still at this time, the United States didn't have an embassy there. We're still talking.
Oh, yeah.
You say this was in 1970? Was this?
Yeah, 1969. So yeah.
69 still. Okay, yeah, no,
no Marines. Yeah.
There wouldn't have been a U.S. military presence here, no diplomatic presence here yet.
No, none whatsoever. Okay, so yeah, and this is Kathleen and Eldridge again during the festival. And now we get to what happened after the festival and kind of how things fell apart. We said that during the festival there was a conflict between Stokely Carmichael and Eldridge Cleaver, because Eldridge was getting a big head. He wanted to do some other stuff. He didn't want to just do like ideology presentation and like getting allies.
Yeah, so this is the part where the organization kind of falls apart. This is the drama. This is the part if there was a movie made.
This is where we spilled the tea.
This would be high drama. So Lina's spilling the tea. If you're just joining us just now, we're talking to Lina Baaziz, who is a master's student in American Studies from Constantine, and she is talking to us about a subject she's passionate about, a subject she's writing her thesis on, which is about when the Black Panthers came to Algeria. So we're just getting to I think all of this was pretty juicy, but as we say in English, we're getting to the juicy part now. Hijacks and murder.
Yeah, hijacks and murder and gender-based violence. So Eldridge wasn't the nicest person out there. He was abusive to his wife. And he was also a cheater, but that's on the side. That's like the causation of the murder. We'll get there. First of all, according to like ideology and stuff, Eldridge wanted to move further from presenting and the ideology and like getting allies into the Black Party movement and like into supporting the Black Panthers party by getting hijacked airplanes from the United States and having them come over into like Algeria and stay in the airport here. And they would have thousands of dollars of money in ransom that the Algerian government would take because it's illegal, like it's an illegal activity, so they can obviously not do that. And Eldridge would be like, no, give me my money. No, give me my money. What are you talking about? And then it happened like I think a few times, and then eventually they were persecuted legally because it was so much illegal activity that eventually Eldridge fled Algeria again. And he keeps fleeing to another country. I think he went to Sweden after that. But the murder part is not talked about a lot. But Eldridge actually killed one of the other party members who were staying here in Algeria over a cause of infidelity between him and his wife. And knowing that is taken into consideration that Eldridge did take into many romantic relationships with Algerian women here, so it wasn't like a big deal whatsoever. But he did murder someone, and he was not charged for any murder whatsoever, not persecuted, not anything. And that did happen. So within the hijacking and the illegal activity and kind of the Algerian society kind of getting annoyed with them because there was an entire parallel to their work that they didn't agree with, that didn't get assimilated into the Algerian culture, which like basically them partying all the time, smoking a lot of marijuana, and bringing that 70s boho culture, like hippie culture from the US into the Algerian society. A lot of like high society intellectuals that were in contact with them didn't appreciate that. So eventually, with the social pressure and all of these tensions, and the tensions of like the Algerian government trying to form relations with the US by then, trying to like, it was mostly commercial, mostly economical. They were trying to like do oil trade. So they had to be very pragmatic about it. They supported revolutionary movements, but at the same time, they didn't want a lot of illegal activity and like ransom money coming into the country. So eventually it all fell apart. They had to go away, and the office was closed, and they were gone.
And then so that was the end of the Black Panthers in Algeria. But what impact did they have on Algeria?
Exactly.
Oh, look at that.
So I'd like to think of them as pioneers in fashion and culture, just because like they were fashion icons. I mean, they were making their own style. Like if you see the pictures, they were normalizing afros, normalizing, you know, like hairstyles, like African natural hair, natural like black hair, and like hairstyles that were celebrated here in Africa, but not in the US as much. Up till now, it's 2022, and sometimes people would reject people for like in the workplace because they have an afro or something like that. So they were fashion icons, they were trendsetters, and I think that they created their own subculture. So when it comes to the cultural side, I think it's worthy to mention that Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mom, was a Black Panther Party member, which kind of like links up to what kind of music he made and the kind of causes that he was fighting for. It makes sense. His godmother is also in the Black Panther Party. And then an interesting thing where the intersection of Algeria and the Black Panther Party and culture comes together is this rock band in Atlanta, Georgia, called Algiers, who make music about the Black Panther Party. So they have a song called Walk Like a Panther and a bunch of other songs. And like, I mean, they use the same mottos that the Black Panther Party used to use, like power to the people, capitalist pigs and stuff like that, like anti-capitalist advertising and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to see that they picked the Algiers part, they took the Panther part, and they kind of made this something of their own. And an
update or an interjection, we actually have this band booked to be guests on this show that you're watching on Let's Chat. So we're going to talk to them probably in about a month about why Algiers. I mean, these are American guys who have, well, they have visited Algiers once, but when they named their band Algiers, they had never been here. So we're going to talk to them about what inspired them to do that. And then also an interjection about the previous slide with Tupac Shakur. I think a lot of people who are watching this right now know of Tupac. I think he was popular in Algiers, or maybe is popular still in Algiers. He was very popular for people my age. When I was a kid, everyone I knew listened to Tupac, white, black, everybody listened to Tupac. I remember very vividly the day that I heard he died. I was at a roller rink and my sister skated up to me and said, "Oh my God, Emily, Tupac died." And we were devastated. We really just loved his music. And now that I live in different countries around the world, Tupac, I mean, number one, I hear a lot of Michael Jackson around. That's probably the American artist that I hear around the most. But number two might be Tupac. I've heard Tupac blaring on the streets of Sana'a, Yemen. I've heard Tupac in East Jerusalem. I've heard Tupac in Morocco. I don't know that I've heard him in Algiers, but I do know that Algerians like him.
Algerians love like African American and Black American culture. And that's also one of the impacts that I wanted to talk about. Like, after the Pan-African Festival, I think it's worthy to mention that Algerians do identify, like regardless of our color. I mean, of course, there are Black Algerians, but it's very divisive when it comes to colorism here, because they're like, even after the movements of like Pan-Africanism and stuff like that, we've moved past that as a society. And it's very sad to think of it, because now we detach ourselves and decentralize ourselves from Africanity, especially people who live up north, who aren't as much as immersed into African culture as the people who live in the desert. And that's the majority of the population. And then you also have white passing Algerians and brown Algerians and basically white looking Algerians like myself. And we do not remember that this was part of our heritage, this was part of our history, and that we are African first and foremost. And the only thing that always reminds us that always brings us back to Africanity and like the celebration of Blackness is music, like Black American culture and music. So I think that's why a lot of people listen to Tupac, relate to Black characters on TV more than the white characters, because we do share a history of discrimination as well. We do share a history of marginalization as well, of ethnic cleansing, and of all the bad stuff that happened to Black people all over the world and anyone who's like not white. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that that's worthy of mentioning. I think that's an impact, but that's just me theorizing. I don't have any background for it or like any arguments to back it up yet until I write my thesis.
You're an academic who's studying this, so I think your opinions are very valid on this. You've done the research.
And I think that's just what I feel when I'm studying all of this. It just kind of makes me reflect on the current situation of Black people in my country, the current situation of and the current sentiment towards Blackness in Algeria. And it makes you kind of reflect on like, oh, this is where we were, where we are now, like where are we at? What are we doing right now? So yeah, that's just my reflection. And that was the story of like the Black Panthers in Algiers.
Well, Lina, the fascinating story. Really just a lot of twists and turns there. And I love how you connected it to how the Black Panthers being in Algeria influenced Algerians today, or Algerians' perceptions maybe of Black Americans even. We have a time for maybe a couple questions if anybody wants to ask a few things on YouTube, but we'll wrap up here in just a minute. There's some comments though that I wanted to read to you, Lina. Amina Lamari says she likes how they put their culture up front for everyone to see.
Definitely, yeah. They were very forward about their culture, very unapologetic. They were unapologetically Black, and it was the Black Power movement. Like it was, we're not going to apologize for being Black anymore. So yeah.
She also said that she thinks that a big problem for the organization falling apart was because they focused on personal interests, group interests,
definitely,
and instead of the greater good.
Mm-hmm.
So that could maybe be an important lesson also. You can stop sharing your screen now, Lina.
Okay.
And yes, lots of Algerians here on YouTube know and love Tupac.
Yeah.
There's some Tupac conspiracy theories going on here in the chat too.
Oh, is he still alive?
And he's still alive. That's what many people all over the world think, that despite him dying in, I think, 1996. Well, anyways, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Lina Baaziz, graduate student who just gave us a fascinating presentation on when the Black Panthers were in Algeria in the late 1960s, early 70s. I hope that everybody learned a bit from this. One person in the YouTube chat said that they'll go to bed less dumb tonight because of your smart presentation. So we're, like I said, it's Black History Month. We're doing topics that focus on the contributions that African Americans have made. We're doing this all month. So next Tuesday at 6 p.m. is going to be a we're going to have 3 musicians on who are participants in the One Beat Sahara Festival. So we hope to have on an Algerian musician, a Tunisian musician, and a Moroccan musician. This talk will be in Darija, and we're going to discuss how music has the potential to transcend geographic and racial boundaries. 6 p.m. next Wednesday. I hope you'll tune into that. And the following week, we're also going to have another music episode that's going to feature lots of live performances from our One Beat Sahara musicians. So we have some good stuff coming up. Don't miss these talks. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, our U.S. Embassy YouTube channel. Hit the red subscribe button so you don't miss these talks. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And Lina, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you for having me.